Listen carefully. Not everyone who tests your patience deserves your reaction. Some people bring noise, negativity, and chaos wherever they go. They provoke, criticize, manipulate, and drain energy. And the real danger is not their behavior. It's what happens when you let them control your inner state. The moment you lose your calm, you hand them power over you. Toxic people thrive on reaction. They feed on emotional responses, anger, frustration, defensiveness. Calmness starves them. When you stay centered, you deny them the reward they seek. You show strength without raising your voice. You show confidence without explaining yourself. Calmness becomes your shield. You cannot control how others behave, but you always control how you respond. And that single truth determines whether you remain powerful or become drained. Toxic people often operate on impulse. They provoke, criticize, complain, or manipulate without reflection. If you react emotionally, you step into their pattern and surrender control. The moment your emotions are hijacked, your clarity disappears. Control begins when you refuse to let someone else decide your internal state. Reaction is automatic. Control is intentional. Most reactions happen without thought because the mind is conditioned to defend, explain, or retaliate. Toxic behavior triggered ego, insecurity, or anger, and the body responds before the mind can intervene. Mastery requires slowing that process. When you pause before responding, you break the cycle. That pause is where power lives. It allows you to choose restraint over impulse and intelligence over emotion. Toxic people often seek reaction more than resolution. They are energized by attention, conflict, and emotional engagement. When you react strongly, you give them exactly what they want. Calm responses, or no response at all, remove their leverage. You are not ignoring reality. You are refusing to participate in dysfunction. Silence, composure, and brevity can be more effective than long explanations or emotional defenses. Your reaction shapes the outcome more than their behavior. Two people can face the same provocation and experience completely different results based solely on how they respond. One escalates the situation, the other neutralizes it. One leaves angry and drained, the other leaves unaffected. The difference is not circumstance, it is self-control. Control is not about suppressing emotion but directing action despite emotion. Anger feels powerful, but it weakens judgment. When emotions spike, logic shuts down. Words spoken in reaction cannot be taken back, and decisions made in heat often create long-term consequences. Toxic people may move on quickly, but you are left dealing with the aftermath of your reaction. Control protects you from damage that lingers long after the interaction ends. Awareness is the first layer of control. You must recognize your triggers. Certain tones, phrases, or behaviors consistently provoke emotional responses. Once you identify them, they lose some of their power. You begin to see the pattern instead of falling into it. Awareness turns emotional ambush into predictable behavior, and predictability reduces threat. Breathing is a physical anchor to control. When you feel triggered, your breathing changes immediately. Shallow, fast breaths signal danger to the nervous system. Slowing your breath sends the opposite message. This simple act stabilizes your body and gives your mind time to regain command. Control is not only mental, it is physiological. Regulate the body, and the mind follows. Choosing not to react does not mean you agree or accept mistreatment. It means you value your peace more than proving a point. You can still set boundaries, express disagreement, or walk away without emotional charge. Controlled responses are firm, concise, and clear. They do not seek validation or victory. They seek resolution or distance. Detachment strengthens control. When you stop taking toxic behavior personally, your reactions soften. Most toxicity is not about you. It is about the other person's unresolved issues, insecurity, or lack of self-awareness. Internalizing the behavior gives it meaning it does not deserve. Detachment allows you to observe without absorbing. Ego is often the enemy of control. Ego wants to be right, respected, and acknowledged. Toxic people exploit this by provoking ego-based reactions. When you release the need to win, explain, or defend, control becomes easier. Not every battle deserves your energy. Walking away emotionally is often the most powerful response. Practice builds control. You do not suddenly become composed under pressure, you train for it. Start with small moments of irritation, delays, criticism, misunderstandings. Each time you pause instead of reacting, you strengthen the habit. Over time, what once triggered you becomes manageable. Control becomes natural rather than forced. Your reaction also sets a standard. People learn how to treat you based on what you tolerate and how you respond. Consistent calmness communicates strength. It signals that manipulation, disrespect, or provocation will not succeed. Some people adjust their behavior, others remove themselves. Both outcomes protect your peace. Control preserves energy. Emotional reactions consume mental and physical resources. They distract from goals, drain focus, and linger in the mind long after the interaction ends. Controlled responses end the exchange cleanly. You move on without carrying resentment or regret. Energy saved is energy redirected toward growth. Ultimately, controlling your reaction is an act of self-respect. It means you value your time, clarity, and emotional well-being more than temporary satisfaction. You stop allowing external chaos to create internal disorder. You remain grounded while others remain reactive. Control turns toxic encounters into tests of discipline rather than sources of damage, and each time you pass that test, you reinforce the authority you have over yourself and your inner state regardless of who stands in front of you or what they try to provoke from you. Boundaries are not walls built out of anger. They are lines drawn out of self-respect. Toxic people often thrive where boundaries are weak or unclear. They push, test, interrupt, demand, and intrude because they are accustomed to others yielding out of guilt, fear, or obligation. When you fail to set boundaries, you silently teach people how to treat you. Calm strength begins the moment you decide that your time, energy, and mental well-being matter. Setting boundaries without guilt requires clarity within yourself first. If you are unsure of what you will tolerate, others will sense it. Boundaries are rooted in values. When you know what you stand for, what drains you, and what supports your growth, it becomes easier to say no without explaining or apologizing excessively. Guilt often comes from confusing kindness with self-sacrifice. You can be respectful without being available to disrespect. Toxic people often react negatively to boundaries because they benefit from the absence of them. When you begin to say no, limit access, or disengage, you may be labeled as cold, selfish, or difficult. These labels are attempts to pull you back into old patterns. Calm strength means allowing others to feel uncomfortable with your boundaries without rushing to soothe that discomfort. Their reaction is not your responsibility. A boundary does not need to be loud or aggressive to be effective. Calm boundaries are simple and consistent. Short responses, clear limits, repeated action. You do not need long explanations or emotional justifications. Over-explaining weakens boundaries by inviting debate. Calm strength communicates through firmness, not volume. Guilt often arises from fear of disappointing others. Toxic dynamics exploit this fear. They rely on your desire to be liked, accepted, or seen as helpful. When you prioritize approval over peace, boundaries collapse. Calm strength grows when you accept that not everyone will be pleased with your choices. Discomfort from others is temporary. Resentment from self-betrayal lasts much longer. Boundaries also apply internally. You must stop negotiating with yourself when you know something is harmful. If you allow repeated violations because you hope someone will change, you abandon your own needs. Calm strength requires honesty about patterns. Words mean little without consistent behavior. When patterns repeat, boundaries must become firmer. Distance is sometimes the most powerful boundary. Not all situations require confrontation. Reducing exposure, limiting communication, or disengaging emotionally can restore balance without conflict. Calm strength understands that access to you is earned, not owed. You can love people from afar without allowing them to disrupt your inner stability. Boundaries protect energy. Emotional labor is expensive. Constantly managing someone else's moods, problems, or conflicts drains focus and strength. Calm boundaries conserve energy for what matters most. They allow you to invest in growth rather than survival. Saying no to one thing is often saying yes to your health, clarity, and progress. Consistency is what makes boundaries real. Setting a boundary once, but allowing repeated exceptions teaches others that persistence will wear you down. Calm strength shows up through repetition. Each time you reinforce the same limit without anger or explanation, it becomes more respected. Consistency removes confusion and reduces conflict over time. Guilt weakens when you reframe boundaries as responsibility rather than rejection. You are not rejecting people, you are protecting your well-being. You are not punishing anyone, you are choosing balance. When boundaries are framed as self-care rather than conflict, they become easier to uphold calmly. Toxic people often escalate when boundaries appear. They may push harder, guilt trip, or create drama. Calm strength does not rise to the bait. Escalation is often a test. If you hold steady, the behavior either changes or loses access. Both outcomes serve your peace. Boundaries also teach others how to interact with you respectfully. Many people are not intentionally toxic. They are simply unaware. Calm boundaries provide structure. They communicate expectations without hostility. Healthy individuals adjust. Unhealthy ones resist. This distinction becomes clear only when boundaries are enforced. Setting boundaries without guilt requires letting go of the belief that you are responsible for other people's emotions. You can be compassionate without being consumed. You can listen without absorbing. Calm strength allows empathy with limits. You remain human without becoming a container for chaos. Your nervous system responds to boundaries. When limits are clear, stress decreases, anxiety fades, calmness becomes more accessible. Boundaries create psychological safety, allowing you to remain present rather than defensive. They shift interactions from emotional survival to conscious choice. Over time, boundaries reshape identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who honors their needs. Self-trust grows. Confidence deepens. Calm strength becomes natural rather than forced. You no longer second-guess your right to protect your peace. Setting boundaries without guilt is a skill built through repetition, courage, and self-respect. Each time you choose clarity over comfort, you reinforce that your inner stability is worth defending, that your energy is valuable, and that calm strength is not about pleasing others, but about remaining aligned with yourself, even when pressure, manipulation, or expectation tries to pull you away from what you know is necessary for your well-being and growth. When your mind is anchored to purpose, negativity loses its ability to pull you off course. Toxic behavior gains power only when it becomes the center of your attention. When your focus drifts, distractions multiply. Staying grounded in your purpose is not about ignoring reality, it is about choosing what deserves your energy. Purpose acts like an internal compass. It keeps you moving forward, even when others try to slow you down, provoke you, or derail your progress. Toxic people often thrive on distraction. They pull conversations into drama, conflict, or emotional chaos because it shifts focus away from growth and responsibility. When your purpose is unclear, their behavior feels louder and more intrusive. When your purpose is clear, their behavior becomes background noise. You stop reacting to every comment because you are invested in something larger than the moment. Purpose creates perspective. It reminds you why you are doing what you are doing. When you know where you are going, you become less concerned with who is trying to interfere. Many conflicts feel urgent only because there is no stronger priority competing for your attention. A strong sense of direction naturally minimizes the importance of unnecessary battles. Staying grounded in purpose requires daily reinforcement. Purpose fades when it is not revisited. Toxic environments exploit mental drift. When you forget your long-term goals, you become emotionally available for short-term conflict. Reconnecting with purpose each day strengthens resolve. It shifts attention from reaction to intention. Focus is a limited resource. Toxic interactions consume it quickly. When your focus is scattered, your emotional defenses weaken. Purpose organizes focus. It helps you decide what deserves engagement and what does not. Not every situation requires a response. Purpose filters decisions. It allows you to conserve energy for what actually moves you forward. When you are aligned with purpose, self-worth becomes internal rather than external. Toxic people often attack confidence through criticism, comparison, or manipulation. If your identity is tied to approval, these tactics succeed. Purpose-centered identity resists these attacks. You measure yourself by effort, progress, and integrity rather than opinion. Purpose also strengthens emotional resilience. It gives meaning to discomfort. Challenges become part of a larger narrative rather than isolated frustrations. Toxic behavior still exists, but it no longer feels personal. It becomes an obstacle on the path, not a judgment of your value. Clarity of purpose reduces rumination. Without purpose, the mind replays interactions, arguments, and insults. With purpose, attention returns to action. You replace overthinking with movement. Progress quiets negativity more effectively than confrontation ever could. Grounded focus also influences behavior. When purpose leads, responses become measured. You choose words carefully. You disengage faster. You avoid unnecessary explanations. You stop trying to convince people who are not aligned with your direction. Purpose-driven behavior is efficient. It minimizes emotional waste. Toxic environments often pressure you to shrink, conform, or abandon standards. Purpose acts as resistance. It reminds you why your standards exist. It helps you endure temporary discomfort without compromising long-term values. When purpose is strong, you do not negotiate with distractions that threaten your trajectory. Purpose creates momentum. Momentum reduces vulnerability. When you are actively building, learning, training, or improving, negativity has less room to settle. Stagnation invites drama. Movement dissolves it. Staying engaged with your goals leaves little space for resentment or fixation on others' behavior. A grounded mind recognizes patterns. You begin to see that many toxic behaviors repeat because they come from unresolved issues. This awareness prevents emotional entanglement. You stop expecting different outcomes from the same patterns. Purpose allows you to step back and choose distance without bitterness. Purpose also reframes success. Success becomes progress, not peace in every moment. You accept that discomfort, friction, and opposition are part of meaningful growth. Toxic people become tests of focus rather than threats to stability. Each interaction becomes an opportunity to practice discipline rather than a source of emotional damage. When your purpose is clear, your boundaries strengthen naturally. You protect time more fiercely. You say no more confidently. You disengage sooner. Purpose gives boundaries direction. They are no longer reactions to people but commitments to progress. Grounding in purpose requires self-honesty. You must know what matters to you beyond comfort and approval. Surface-level goals are easily shaken. Deep purpose holds under pressure. It is connected to values, not convenience. Toxic behavior loses leverage when it cannot threaten what truly matters to you. Over time, purpose-centered focus reshapes emotional habits. You become less reactive, less defensive, less distracted. Calmness emerges naturally because your attention is occupied with growth. You stop feeding negativity with focus. You starve it by choosing direction repeatedly. Purpose is not a destination, it is a daily alignment. Each decision reinforces it or weakens it. Staying grounded requires consistency. You return to it when distracted. You recommit when challenged. Toxic people may remain present, but they no longer determine your emotional state. When focus stays anchored to purpose, your inner world stabilizes regardless of external behavior. Negativity loses influence. Drama loses appeal. Provocation loses reward. You move forward steadily while others remain caught in cycles of reaction. Because your energy is invested in becoming rather than reacting, building rather than battling, progressing rather than proving, and staying aligned with what truly matters to you, even when the environment around you tries to pull your attention away from that path. The next time someone tries to provoke you, pause. Instead of reacting, breathe instead of exploding. Choose composure instead of chaos. Make calmness your daily practice. Make self-control your identity. Make peace your priority. Stay calm, stay grounded, and refuse to give your power to anyone who has not earned it starting today.